fought on the soil of countries whose names we can't pronounce or no longer even find on a map. But they went.
Like today's soldiers, those who fought in World War I left their homes and families to serve. And also, like today's conflicts, many didn't come home. And there is a story behind each one of the 568 names of local soldiers and nurses who died in World War I.
As Jennifer Anderson reports, one of them is just being discovered.
Somewhere in France. Dear Mother, I am sitting here thinking of you tonight and dear old Dad.
These are the words of a man on the road to his death.
I love you all at home more than I ever did before.
But the precious handwritten words are a lifeline to the past for Emily Haddad.
It was like rediscovering an ancestor.
It was partly chance that led Emily to these letters last summer, hidden in the house of an elderly relative who passed away. They were written by a great uncle she never got to meet.
It was a wonderful, very moving feeling to read these letters from 1918. From someone that was related to us and, had been dead for 90-some years and had been forgotten about, basically.
Her father's uncle, Walter S. Lindahl, had fought and died in France at the very end of World War I.
I do not think that this war can last very much longer. I don't think you would recognize your little brother Wally now.
He was just 24.
My being in the Army has made a thinking man of me. It has awakened the finer senses in me instead of hardening me as it does some men.
This is the telegram.
Emily and her brother Mark are documenting the small treasure trove that remains of Walter Lindahl, the original telegram announcing his death.
Killed in action October 7th.
And his sole possession to return from war, a pocket watch.
And that's his mother, Josephine.
Then, of course,
I like to do good things to my fellow man. It hurts me when I cannot help them.
There are the letters.
Please excuse me for seeming sentimental, but I know you want me to talk to you as if I were home with you once more, for I have no secrets to keep from you, dear mother. We could see at the end of those letters that there was a lot of potential for a very good person there, and it's a kind of a tragedy that he was never able to, live that life.
A letter from a fellow soldier describes Walter's tragic end.
Our company went over the top that fatal morning, and Walter was hit by machine bullets in his leg and stomach about 6:30 a.m. and died sometime that night.
Emily and her brother traveled to that very battlefield in France exactly 92 years from the date Walter died.
There's a small village to the right called Beaurevoir. He would have seen this beautiful French village and the sun setting, and so we wanted to experience that.
Oh, say, can you see?
Emily and Mark have also discovered traces of Walter closer to home at the rededication of Victory Memorial Drive.
This is a place of remembering and a place of living,
where Walter's name is among the honored.
It's beautiful. It's wonderful what they've done.
They placed a flag by the placard along the drive which bears his name.
I thought it was important to see the rededication of the place where he is memorialized. His family was here at the original dedication back in the 20s, and so it's pretty neat to come out and see it again being rededicated.
I think it's important to continue to have memorials to people who died for the country, and it's their sacrifice that has allowed us to continue to live a good life here.
The sacrifice of one young man is now memorialized in stone and in stories.
Well, Mother, I must now close and hope you and Dad and the rest are well. God bless you. Your loving son, Walter Lindahl.
Emily and her family feel it's somewhat of a miracle that these letters were returned to them. They were found in a home that was about to open to the public for an estate sale.
It's the morning of October 7th. We're going to head first to the battlefield where Walter was killed.
Beaurevoir.
Yeah, it'll be Beaurevoir.
My brother Mark and I were driving to the World War I battlefields of northern France.
Okay, here we are. We've just arrived in Beaurevoir. Beautiful farewell.
Daniel Desmarais is Beaurevoir's unofficial historian.
Ça, on retrouve encore dans le jardin. Dans le jardin de chez nous, derrière. Parce que dans le jardin, à l'époque 14-18, il y avait le chemin de fer qui passait encore là.
Oui.
Le chemin de fer passait dans le champ au milieu. Et il passait derrière le cimetière. Donc c'était le chemin de fer de l'époque. Et il y avait des gens ici, il y avait pas mal de choses ici, tout le long de l'allée là.
Oui.
Tout le long de l'allée.
Parce que ça fait 33 ans qu'on habite ici et on a retrouvé des obus, carrément des obus encore chargés. On a dû mettre de côté pour les faire déminer, enfin les donner à quelqu'un.
Régulièrement, quand je bêche, on remonte des balles. Il y a des balles qui remontent encore maintenant, depuis toujours on est là.
That's the village of Beaurevoir in the distance, and this road was where Walter Lindahl and his company I went over the top on the morning of October 7th, exactly 92 years ago.
Company I advanced in this direction up towards that hill, but they didn't get very far because the machine gun fire from the cemetery, from the railroad bed, from the two towns of Poncho.
Our journey to Beaurevoir and this battlefield began 3 months before at a house in St. Paul, Minnesota. The house was being sold after the death of its elderly owner. The estate sale manager contacted me and asked if I knew the house. It was a house filled with my childhood memories. I visited it many times in the 1950s when my grandparents lived there. Thanksgiving dinner with my Aunt Bev, my great-aunts Agnes and Jenny, my grandpa, and especially my beloved grandma, Hildegard. She died when I was 10. The estate sale manager had another question, the reason she called. She asked me if I knew a Walter Lindahl. The name startled me. I hadn't heard it pronounced in many years. Walter Lindahl was my grandma Hildegard's brother, my great-uncle, killed in World War I. His long-lost letters from the war had been found in the basement of the old house. The news excited me. A voice from the past, from an ancestor who died 33 years before I was born, who had gone to war and given his life for our country. We, his descendants, had nearly forgotten him and the life he sacrificed. Now I had a chance to get to know my great-uncle, Walter Lindahl. I arranged to meet the lady at the old house to collect the letters, and I called my brother Mark.
Oh, this is to his brother. It says, this is September 11th, somewhere behind the lines. Dear George, bing, back of the lines again, so here goes some more bull. I am not in the immediate danger zone now, so breathing is a little easier.
I've been under shell fire since July 4th, so you can imagine how it feels to be back in civilization away from whiz-bangs, gas, and big shells. It was a hot place called Hell's Corner. I'm still a machine gunner, and expect to make it hot for Jerry when I come at grips with him again. I've been over half of this old world of ours now, so I'll have a great deal to chew the fat about when I come home.
There were 40 letters written by my great-uncle to his family in the 8 months he was an American soldier during World War I. I read them in the order he wrote them. They painted for me a portrait of a young man transformed by war. His name was Walter Sigurd Lindahl, born to Swedish immigrants in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1894. He was the fifth of Andrew and Josephine's 6 children. Walter's younger sister, Hildegard, was my grandmother. Walter's father, Andrew, immigrated to Minneapolis in 1869 when he was 23 years old. There he continued in his profession as a house painter. In 1884, Andrew married Josephina Wall, also a Swedish immigrant. I wanted to learn more about the Lindahl family. Mark and I pulled out an old trunk from his basement. It contained all the personal property handed down to us from the Lindahls. Jewelry, silverware, linens, including many beautiful hand-sewn and embroidered needlework. The books, documents, and photos show a family literate and musical, active in their Swedish-American immigrant community. A silver tray with an engraving reads, 25th anniversary, December 13, 1884 to 1909. A Swedish-American newspaper article describes an anniversary party given by 80 friends of Andrew and Josephine at their home. A brother-in-law reads a poem he has written.
Nu vi gratulera vårt silverbröllopspar och önska eder fortsatt fröjd och lycka. Må Gud er låta leva bland barnen länge kvar. Må han få er intill sitt hjärta.
Second and third grade McGuffey readers. These were Walter's books. He wrote in them and drew in them. The drawings are sophisticated for his age. My dad, Walter's nephew, told us that Walter always wanted to be an artist and began drawing and painting as a young man. We have only a few photos of Walter. (1912), the Lindahl and Gustafson cousins attend a dinner party. By this time, Walter has left school and joined his father in the house painting business. Walter drinks a toast with his cousin Ruth. 2 years later, the world goes insane. August 1914. Germany invades Belgium on its way to France. Britain declares war against Germany, and British men head off to fight in Belgium and France.
All we down off,
Many thought the war would be over by Christmas of 1914. They were wrong. During the next 4 years, Europe will sacrifice the youth of an entire generation, see the destruction of a large part of its civilization, and the mass murder of its peoples. By the end of the war, the total number of military and civilian deaths was nearly 20 million. The peace movement kept the United States out of the Great War for 2.5 years. Then, in 1917, German submarines began unrestricted warfare, attacking and sinking unarmed American merchant ships. On April 6, 1917, America declared war on Germany.
We are committed to sacrifice and battle in order to make America safe for Americans and establish their security on every lawful mission on the high seas or under the shining sun. A republic worth living in is worth fighting for and sacrificing for and dying for.
There's a long, long trail winding into the land of my dreams, where the nightingales are singing and the white moon beams. There's a long, long night of waiting.
300,000 young men, out of patriotism and lust for adventure, volunteered for the army. But America needed an army of millions to fight this war. Congress quickly approved President Wilson's request for a national draft. Walter did not volunteer to fight. When he registered for the draft, he claimed weak lungs as a reason for exemption. Family documents indicate that Walter had recently recovered from pneumonia, but it is also true that Swedish Americans generally opposed entering the war. Congressman Ernest Lundin from Minneapolis was one of only 50 House members who voted against the war. He claimed that Minneapolis voters opposed the war 10-1. Andrew was 71 years old in 1917. He had recently been diagnosed with congestive heart failure. He desperately needed Walter's help in the house painting business, which supported the family. Josephine, Walter's mother, a religious woman, probably opposed the war, and both parents feared for the life of their son. In February 1918, Walter Lindahl said goodbye to his family and boarded a train for Camp Dodge in Iowa. He never saw his family again.
February 9th, 1918. Camp Dodge, Iowa. Dear Mother, I'm getting a little settled now. You know how it is when a fellow gets into something new. You get all flustered up. It's a great life if you don't weaken. Anyone that says you don't get taken care of here is a liar. We get 3 big meals a day, and we get the finest of food. We got another shot in the arm today. I guess I'm pretty tough. That makes 2 shots and 2 vaccinations, and I feel the same as ever. Some boys fainted.
How I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I'd like to remain in bed. Go! For the heart is so warm, it's the
March 8th. Dear Mother, I'm feeling fine. You wouldn't know your son. I'm getting lots of color in my face. This life is making a real man of me. I was in the crack squad today. We drilled for some visitors. I'm getting the military stride. A full 30-inch step. So you can see I'm some guy. Our regiment is going to give a minstrel show on Friday at the Liberty Theater. 7 men from each company were selected to sing in it, and I was one of them. We go to church every Sunday. I have an Army New Testament, so you can see I've changed a bit. I'll probably be home on furlough in a couple of months. April 2nd. I'm writing now to let you know that I'll leave this camp this week sometime. Where? I don't know. But don't worry. I'm the one that's worrying about those at home. So keep the home fires burning till I return, which I surely will someday. I'm quite a man now and getting hard as iron. I guess this life isn't hurting me. Dear Mother, I just had the greatest trip I've ever taken. If you ever think this country isn't loyal, take a train ride like I did. You would soon find out. We were cheered in every town we went through. I can now say that I've been in 7 states besides Minnesota. When this letter reaches you, no doubt you'll be surprised to know that I'm in Camp Sevier in South Carolina, 1,840 miles from my dear old home. I've been assigned to Company I of the 3rd Battalion, 117th Regiment, 30th Division. I didn't like to be separated from most of my friends, but that's the Army.
National Guardsmen from Tennessee, South Carolina, and North Carolina made up the 30th Division. In April, the Army transferred in several thousand recently drafted men from Camp Dodge to bring the division up to its full strength of 30,000 men.
Worth Stewart, another Minnesotan, arrived at Camp Sevier with Walter. Worth was 26 years old, had majored in English at Hamlin College, and was working for a publishing company in St. Paul when he was drafted. Worth was assigned to Company K of the 3rd Battalion. Because Walter's Company I and Worth Stewart's Company K were both part of the 3rd Battalion, they shared the same locations during their time in France. Walter and Worth may even have known each other. Worth wrote a book about the experiences of his Company K during the war. That book became an invaluable source of information about Walter's own experiences and day-to-day life in his neighboring Company I. Another soldier from the 30th Division, Sergeant Paul Green, kept a diary and wrote poems about his experience in the war. His writing describes the emotions and inner thoughts going through the heads and hearts of the soldiers. Paul was studying literature and poetry at the University of North Carolina, but left school to join the Army when America declared war.
I hated to leave school, but should one have a higher aim than that of helping win the war? Could anyone have a bigger success in life than giving his life towards whipping Germany?
Dear folks, I thought I would write you to let you know that I expect to take a long journey soon. Thanks to everyone for all the kindness shown me when I left home. I think I left without an enemy and with friends who I'm sure hold me in their highest respects. Especially Ed Wendt, who gave me that party and my splendid watch, which keeps very good time.
Left Camp Sevier yesterday morning. Caught train for the long, long trail. A sad event happened last night. One of our men jumped from the train and was killed.
Dear Sis, I received your letter and very pleased to get it. There was one part that hurt me for a while. Such things are bad to send us, as we boys are very sensitive after being fed on beans and being so far from our loved ones. So be a little more optimistic in the things you write, as we see enough darkness ahead of us.
Our 3rd Battalion, Companies I, K, L, and M, sailed on the British ship, the Anselm. We boarded the boat near midday of the 10th of May and left harbor on the 11th.
I remember that gray morning when the great ships slipped their moorings. All of us were gaily singing, and the Yankee yells were ringing. Soon the leaden sky bent o'er us, and the great sea lay before us. Then the land and cities faded from our view. Thick the swirling fog swept around us, and a lonely feeling found us, while the snapping waves along the taffrail flew. For the call of home and the treacherous foam set astir a nameless sorrow in the air.
All around us were boats painted in various colors and many patterns calculated to deceive the eye of the enemy's submarines. An American battlecruiser led the convoy. It would stay with us until we were met by British battleships halfway across the Atlantic. For the first time in our lives, we were being hunted. All of us, with one accord, began searching the far-stretched waters for periscopes. We soon lost interest in periscopes. We lost interest in submarines. We lost interest in torpedoes. As one of us put it, 6 meals a day, 3 down and 3 up. Today we watched as our American cruiser wheeled about and passed by us on the way back to America. As she passed, the wind faintly brought to our ears the strains of our national anthem, and at her stern fluttered the prettiest flag in the world, the Stars and Stripes. A few moments later, the cruiser dropped from view over the horizon to the west, leaving us with a strange sense of loneliness and weakness. An army of enemies ahead of us, our dear ones and home, getting farther and farther away. On May 24th, we docked at a French seaport and marched off to an old camp east of the city. The next morning, we exchanged our rifles for a British gun, the Enfield. We received 100 rounds of ammunition and British steel helmets. On May 27th, we hiked to a small village east of Calais. It was to be our first overseas training camp. British soldiers gave us lessons in bayonet running, gas attacks, and trench and open warfare.
Somewhere in France, dearest mother, I'm writing you at my earliest opportunity, so I hope you'll forgive me for not writing before, as I've not had the chance, in no possible manner. I'm in the best possible health and had a grand trip, and I did not get the least bit seasick. I guess the sea life runs in our family.
Somewhere in France. Walter's letters always started with this vague location. Walter mailed this letter on June 7, 1918. On that date, he and Worth Stewart were stationed near the village of Inglingham, northern France, in the British sector of the Western Front. Y was an American division stationed with the British Army. June 1918 was a critical month of the war for the Allied forces. The British worried about a new attack on their weakened forces in Flanders. For months, British General Haig had begged American General Pershing to give him some fresh American troops to reinforce the British sector. With great reluctance, and only with President Wilson's approval, Pershing agreed to lend to the British 2 American divisions, the 30th and the New York 27th. These 2 divisions became the American Second Army. Officially, American officers led the corps, but for all practical purposes, British generals controlled the American troops. The British would complete the training of the 2 American divisions in the British sector of the Western Front, far to the northwest from General Pershing's main American army. American troops fighting under British command created issues which led to Walter Lindahl's death on the battlefield.
Dear Mother, I'm still in France, and I'm getting used to this army life. I'm part of a machine gun squad in my company, and I'm tough as iron from lots of exercise and out-of-door living. I guess I won't know how to act when I'm in a house again. There are so many strange sights to see here, so when I come back, I guess I'll have some time recounting my experiences in this great adventure. The English and French are very nice to us Americans. France is a very beautiful country with giant windmills and old rustic flour mills, quite different from the Pillsbury flour mills of Minneapolis. Does my old room look the same? Are you saving some of my old paintings and my drawing kit? I wish I could be home to use it now. I certainly will when I get back. Today is Sunday, and the regimental pastor held services a few feet from my tent. We had singing, and the pastor gave a sermon on God watching over us as a shepherd over his flock. It was one of the finest I ever heard. He asked all those who wanted to give themselves to God to step forward, and 6 came forward, of which I was one. I'll tell you, I was swallowing hard, but I never felt so much of a man in all my life. I've learned at last the true meaning of God's word, and will try to lead a straightforward life from now on.
None of the French here have seen an American before, but they've come to know us well. In the evenings, we help them with their chores. All the young and strong men are off somewhere in the French army, leaving the old men, the women, and the children to carry on. About every family in France is in mourning for lost members of their families. The war has touched all of them.
From our new billets, we can hear the guns at the front, and they roar all night. It's hell there. But I like where we are. The beautiful lanes of France, the birds singing in the hawthorn hedges, the peasants working in the fields. All these contrast so much with our own aims. It fills me with sadness. We will be leaving this place in a few days, headed north.
Our national holiday, the 4th of July, was another day of hiking, and toward noon we crossed the boundary of France into Belgium. Late in the afternoon we could see the observation balloons along the Ypres front. Our first night in our tents in Flanders is one of considerable anxiety. Everyone imagines that the German planes know our exact location with orders to bomb us at some unknown 0 hour in the future.
My engineer platoon will be reinforcing the British defensive lines during the next few weeks. At 6:30 in the evening, we boarded little trains and rode for an hour, and then left the train and marched 3.5 hours down the big road toward Ypres. We reached Ypres about 2 a.m. Destruction appalling. Not a building standing. The famous Cloth Hall is a pitiful picture. A whole battalion of British troops are under the ruins where they were buried by a sudden bombardment. The big moon looks sadly at it all. In the morning, we built barbed wire fence. Heavy work through rain and sun. We worked where the Canadians had been gassed in 1915. The country is low and ill-smelling. Remains of long-dead soldiers found in the grass. Many are exposed from too shallow graves. Horses and soldiers exhumed by shells. Scent awful. Only rats and mosquitoes among the marsh grass. The snipers were picking at us continually. Nearly every night someone gets it.
August 5th. This evening we advanced under cover of darkness through the ruins of Ypres to take up a position in the front. All about us were big British cannon pouring an unrelenting torrent of screaming projectiles at the enemy and rocking the earth with every report. Beyond the front line trenches were 3 zigzag rows of barbed wire, and beyond that, no man's land, covered with dry grass 1.5 feet in height. We dug trenches in the rain and slept when opportunity offered in dugouts and shanties. Big rats and cooties bothered us all night.
American machine gun squads were rotated into dangerous outpost positions in no man's land. Bill Clark, part of a machine gun squad like Walter Lindahl, describes the experience that Walter no doubt shared.
August 12th. Last night after midnight, my 4-man machine gun team left our frontline trench and took our position in no man's land. A few whispered remarks passed between us and our buddies like, "Good luck out there," as they pushed us up over the parapet. We ran, crawling over barbed wire fencing. We came to a shell hole where there was the British machine gun unit we were replacing. We mounted our machine gun, loaded it, and settled down to await developments. We were a little army of 4 men with 1 machine gun, 4 revolvers, and about a dozen hand grenades. We were the only opposition to a German raid or attack until the enemy force would meet our infantry in the trenches behind us. At 2 a.m., there was a great boom, followed by an intense barrage of everything in the book. The devil himself and all the little devils in hell could never have devised the punishment we went through for almost an hour. Shrapnel, mortar shells, machine gun bullets, whiz-bangs were landing and exploding all around us. It seemed nothing could save us from a direct hit. I sat with my back against the end of the foxhole, my legs pulled up under my chin, my whole body went into a muscle spasm. My buddy was sitting in the same position. We did not confide our fears to each other, but both of us were secretly ashamed.
August 21st. Dear folks, I'm now one of Uncle Sam's fighting men, and have been very lucky so far in this great struggle. I've been in the frontline trenches, and it is sure a place to find out what kind of stuff a man is made of. I've been fortunate so far, so I guess God is watching over me. I leave my life in His hands. This war is making a man of me, and has learned me a great many things. Gee, you cannot imagine how strange it is in the battle line. So many things going on. It all seems like a dream to me. Up here, you live in little dugouts or little rooms dug under the ground. Outside of rats and lice, it ain't so bad, but a man has to keep his head working. I have a good chum named Martin Shattuck from St. Paul. We stick together like brothers, and I think we'll always be the same. It's raining today, so it's a little muddy, but we get used to almost anything. You people at home don't know how things are and how nice you have it at home. You don't realize this until you get as far away as I am. I hear the girls are now living at the lake. Tell them to take a tip from me and hang on to that place out there. For if they want to sell it, I will buy it from them when I get back from the war. Dad, I suppose you're very busy now without my help, but don't work too hard and take care of yourself until your son comes home again. I think this war will soon be over, but if it don't, we must be brave and make the best of it. So cheer up, Dad. The sun will shine again, and we'll make the old business hum as never before.
August 24th. Our casualties are sickening. Every day we lose 6 or 7 men from our regiment. Oh, what thoughts must be with those at home. The gray old man, the wrinkled mother, receiving the yellow slip of woe every day. God preserve them. September 3rd. Rain. Preparing to move south, back to France.
September 11th, 1918, somewhere behind the lines. Dear George, well, I'm down in France again after traveling around a bit. I've been over half of this old world of ours now, so I'll have a great deal to chew the fat about. I'm still a machine gunner, and expect to make it hot for Jerry when I come at grips with him again. I'm the same old nut that I was at home, although quite reformed in a lot of respects. They say the army makes a man or a bum out of a man, but I think it's made some improvements on your old bud. Tell them not to worry at home. I think we've got the Germans wind up now, and the game's going our way. So it's but a matter of time with luck with us. I can see nothing but victory in sight, so cheer up. The sun will shine again.
I arrived in Paris in September 2010. I had rented a small apartment in the Latin Quarter. Paris teemed with life and activity. Parisians back in the city after their August vacation. 92 years had passed since the September days of 1918. Like the men who fought and died then, those long ago days lay outside the span of living memory. A few days after I arrived, my brother Mark sent me an email. In it, he attached 2 papers written by Captain Nathaniel Callan. Callan commanded the 3rd Battalion, which included companies I, K, L, and M. Both Walter Lyndall and Worth Stewart were under his command. Callan wrote the 2 papers during the 1920s at the military school in Fort Benning, Georgia. The first paper discusses his 3rd Battalion's participation in a major Allied attack to break the German defensive line known as the Hindenburg Line. Callan's second paper is a much more personal account of a small action which took place on October 7, 1918, and involved only Callan's 3rd Battalion. Walter Lyndall was killed in this action. After reading Callan's second paper, I took a long walk in the Luxembourg Gardens, saddened and angered by what I had learned. It was the middle of September, the beginning of autumn in France. Exactly 92 years before, 150 miles north of Paris, in the small town of Saint-Paul, Walter Lyndall and Worth Stewart were training for the biggest battles of their lives.
We're near the town of St. Paul, many miles behind the lines, going through advanced training in open warfare.
My 3rd Battalion was getting training in how to work with heavy tanks. We practiced with the tanks until we could almost carry on a conversation with them in infantry tank signals. On the 20th of September, the 27th and 30th Divisions moved out toward the front. We were moving to the area around the small town of Tincourt.
September 22. What a day we have had. All day we walked through a devastated country. God, what a sight. Death everywhere. A blade of grass ashamed to show its head. The roads, once beautiful with trees, are bare. The Germans have sawed them off and blown them up for miles and miles. Not a farmhouse standing. Nothing but graves. Germans and Allied, alongside the roads. Here and there, everywhere, are the pitiful crosses praying to the skies. I never dreamed of such a vast burial ground.
When we saw our first dead German soldier, we wondered in our hearts what his folks at home would think. Whether he was married and leaving a widow and orphans, or the only son of some poor mother whose heart would break to learn that her son was dead.
Somewhere. Dear Mother, sitting here tonight, dreaming of my dear ones at home. At times, I feel very strengthened just by thoughts of all the good that you have done for me. It was through my thoughts of you that I stepped forth that Sunday evening and thrust my life into the hands of God. I have no fear of death now. It seems that a great change has come over me, and I feel at ease despite all the hardships that we're facing daily. I feel that God is on our side, and I'm sure that we are on the road to victory. So, cheer up, Mother. The sun will shine again, and if it is God's will, I will come marching home again. It's getting dark now, so I'll close for this time, wishing you all that is good. God bless you. P.S. I still read my testament, so don't worry. I think I'll be home by Christmas.
At Tincourt, we found that we were next to the British Army, directly facing the Hindenburg Line. The British, French, and Americans had a grand strategy for breaking the German Hindenburg Line. Simultaneously, the Belgians and British would attack in the north, and the French and Pershing's American army would attack the line in the south. The third and most powerful attack would come from the British at the strongest fortified point of the Hindenburg Line. The 27th and 30th American Divisions would be the shock troops for that attack. The St. Quentin Canal makes up the Hindenburg Line in this section. Massive German bunkers line the walls on the opposite side of the canal from the Allies. But the canal also enters a tunnel at this point, and it is over the top of the tunnel that our American divisions will attack. The land above the tunnel is to be the bridge over which tanks could pass.
Once our two divisions were across the land over the tunnel, we would turn and be behind the Germans, and at that point the steep banks and deep water of the canal would not help them. Our 3rd Battalion was to be in reserve. We did not have the brilliant job of going over the top. That fell to the 1st Battalion. But we would follow behind to mop up.
Wednesday, September 25. Busiest day ever preparing for a big attack in a few days. Carpenters making crosses. Ordered rolls of burlap to bury men in.
September 29th. Promptly at 5:50 a.m., the barrage fell with a roar. Explosions of the field artillery shells could be heard all along the line. The artillery also laid down a smoke screen to cover the Allies' movements. Just as we went over the top, the ground mists combined with the smoke screen made it impossible to see over 6 feet ahead of us.
Advancing from our trenches behind the first line of attack, we crossed a valley buried in a smoke screen. Within 5 minutes, we'd lost our way. Something appeared dimly through the fog, coming down the road toward us. It was a team of stretcher bearers carrying a wounded man. He was American, and the stretcher bearers were German prisoners. We came to trenches previously held by the Germans. We waded through mud and water ankle deep. The water ran dark red with blood. Here and there lay the bodies of men who a few hours before had been living. Corpses of friend and foe. Now a new horror. We were in the same situation as these men had been, and might at any moment meet their same fate.
A dressing station at our left harbored a dozen poor fellows, white-faced and bloody, some tossing in their pain.
In one of the trenches, we encountered members of the 1st Battalion and asked how it had been going over the top. They replied, "It ain't so bad, nothing much to it."
By 9 a.m., our advanced troops reached the German line. And at that time, a wind arose, which cleared the air. When that happened, the Germans must have got a surprise, for everywhere they could see were Americans. The Hindenburg line had been broken. Our men felt mighty good. They'd come into hand-to-hand conflict with the Germans so successfully that their morale hit the ceiling. This attack was all that any army could ask for. Nothing was left to chance. Everything moved on schedule. 8 days later, my battalion would be asked to go over the top when planning was ill-informed and sloppy. The results would be disastrous for my men.
We'd been very fortunate, for no one in our company had been killed, and only 3 wounded. We were all back together again, tired, but tremendously jubilant to have made it through our first battle. Now they told us we would enjoy a well-deserved rest back of the line.
On October 2nd and 3rd, my battalion marched with heavy packs more than 20 miles to reach our rest area. The rest lasted only 1 day, just long enough to bathe in a nearby stream, get into clean clothes, shave, and write home. On the morning of October 5th, we were ordered to march back to the battle lines. That evening, I got my orders from my commanders. My battalion was to take the place of an Australian battalion on the front line several kilometers ahead and prepare for a general attack on October 8th. I was not happy at that timing. I should have been told of these plans earlier so I could do the necessary forward reconnaissance. The British think that the rank and file are to be herded as sheep and that they have no intelligent, independent thoughts of their own. An Australian officer, Major Marshall, was assigned to show us the way to our new position.
After dark on October 5th, Company K fell in behind our Australian guide and followed him across an open field, down a steep bank to a point near a crossroads, where we dug in and tried to sleep. At midnight, the Germans opened up on us. The barrage killed 3 men of our company and wounded 9. This was our first battle tragedy, and in the dusk of that early morning we went about silently thinking much, but saying little. Could it be possible that Ed, Harry, and Cecil were dead? Our comrades of the past months? Never again could we sing the song about the gang, for part of the gang would never be with us again. And their folks at home? We slammed the door of our mind and tried to think of something else.
My 4 companies had suffered almost 100 casualties during the night hours, and as soon as light came, the German snipers got to work. A man seen was a man hit, and we had more casualties. We couldn't get the wounded out, nor go for rations or water during daylight, and no one could get into us neither. 1 wounded man died during the day. As the morning mists of the Somme Valley began to dissipate, we were able to take stock of the front we held. Looking at the natural landscape, it was hard to believe that countless enemies with deadly weapons hid within close range of us. Nothing good could be said of our position. On our left flank, we could see the town of Beaurevoir and a railroad track leading toward our front to the hamlets of Poncho and Genève, directly across the valley from my companies I and K. Rolling hills lay before us, with no cover from enemy fire. At dusk on October 6th, the Australian major and I set out to reconnoiter the battlefield. An unusual quiet had fallen over the entire front. We advanced about 200 yards ahead of our lines. At that point, we were fired on by machine guns from our left flank and slightly to our rear. The Australian dived into a shallow depression and I dived in after him. The Germans kept raking across the floor of the small area we were in. We could distinctly see the muzzle flash of the guns. 2 coming from the cemetery on the eastern edge of Beaurevoir, others from the railroad bed. Absolute dark descended, and we made our way back to our lines, now with very first-hand information as to the location of the enemy. Upon our return, I had urgent orders to report to Colonel Spence at regimental headquarters. I reached headquarters at 11 p.m. that night.
A map lay on the table.
It showed that the British to the left of my battalion had captured all of Beaurevoir, Poncho, and Genève, my entire left flank. The colonel ordered me to advance our own line to be even with the British on the left, to straighten the line. This small action must begin at dawn, only 6 hours away, to prepare for the general Allied attack on October 8th. Sir, with all due respect, this map is wrong.
I told the colonel the map was wrong. The British had not taken the area on our left flank.
I pointed to the map. Sir, there's no line to straighten.
I told the colonel that Major Marshall and I had been shot at by German machine guns all along our left flank. I told him my men would be slaughtered if the attack were not called off.
And the cemetery here.
Captain, our orders are clear.
The colonel responded that it was too late to change plans, and it would be a poor reflection on our regiment if we did not attack in the morning.
The attack must go ahead.
After a few more minutes of protests, I finally admitted defeat. Now, as I write this, I believe, far too soon. I asked for tank support. It was denied me.
It is too late for that.
You will have a rolling barrage and all the fire you need.
The British artillery officer assigned to our regiment promised to provide a strong rolling barrage before our attack.
The conference was over. I returned to my battalion at 3 a.m., and when I told the Australian major of our meeting, he damned the British officers. It was now less than 3 hours until we would go over the top.
Dear Mother, I'm sitting here thinking of you tonight and my dear old dad. I was walking down the road a couple days ago and saw an old man plowing in a field. It was getting late and I felt sorry for this old man. I never want to see old people work. If I ever get back, I'll do all I can to help them. My being in the army has made a thinking man of me. It has awakened the finer senses in me, instead of hardening me as it does some men. I like to do good things to my fellow man. It hurts me when I cannot help them. Please excuse me for seeming sentimental, but I know you want me to talk to you as if I were home with you once more. I love you all at home more than I ever did before. I have a little confession to make to you. You learned me a little prayer as George and I lay sleeping every night, and that is one thing you requested me to do that I never forgot, and I do not remember the time that I did not say it when I retired. I swear before God, that is the truth. Well, Mother, I must now close and hope you and Dad and the rest are well. God bless you. Your loving son, Walter S. Lindahl.
At 3 a.m. October 7th, we were called out. While awaiting orders, the Germans gave us another whiz-bang barrage that wounded 4 of our group. We waited to hear our own rolling barrage.
As the final minutes ticked off, I listened for the roar of our rolling barrage. All we heard was a few small caliber shells pass over. I could not believe my senses. Was this the British barrage meant to support our attack? At 5:10, the whistles of the company commanders sounded out. The men went over the top with bayonets fixed. The German positions opened fire. A perfect hail of bullets enfiladed the lines. Machine guns and rifle fire from the railroad embankment, cemetery and eastern edge of Beaurevoir, all along our left flank. Fire all along our front. Enemy artillery opened heavily, and the slopes of the hill and valley filled with exploding shells. We watched with a feeling of helplessness and knew that this was much worse than we ever could have imagined.
Taking every bit of cover, we crawled forward. The whistling, biting machine gun bullets cut the air all about us and tossed dirt into our faces. Within a few hours, there were no longer any K, L, M, or I companies. It was more like a terrible dream than a reality. Many men lay out in the field, dead or seriously wounded. No help could get to them.
Dear Miss Lindahl, I cannot express the sorrow I feel over Walter's death. We were the greatest and closest of friends, sleeping together, washing our clothes in mud holes, dividing our water, money, cigarettes. In fact, everything we had. We were inseparable. He was my buddy, and a better one no one ever had. You ask me if he was killed instantly. Well, our company went over the top that fatal morning. Walter was his usual jolly self and was doing his best until he was hit by machine bullets in the leg and stomach about 6:30 a.m. and died sometime that night. The sorrowful part was that it was impossible for stretcher bearers to get to the wounded men that day, so they had to lie on the battlefield. But the glorious part of it is the bravery Walter displayed after being hit. He was conscious all day, always talking as usual to the boys. Before he died, Walter told one of the boys, "I can't live, and I know I'm going to die, but I am not afraid to die. I have Walter's watch. As soon as I get home, I will bring it to you. Your friend in sympathy, Martin Shattuck."
han få er intill sitt hjärta trycka. Och när er sol i väster har stilla dalat, då må hon få andra sidan i högre glans uppgå, och ingen natt skall i det landet vara.